Wayback Machine began archiving the internet. And at this point, it has archived over 1 trillion web pages and over 1 million terabytes of web data. Today, I want to take a look at some of the strangest anomalies hidden in the Wayback Machine. CutOffMyFeet.com. This is a website that you need the Wayback Machine to visit because it's no longer on the internet. Of course, CutOffMyFeet.com is a pretty ominous name. So what's the website all about? You might be asking. Well, entering the website, you're met with text that reads, "Prepare yourself for an adventure like you have never before experienced. In an unprecedented event, live via webcam access, you can watch me amputate my legs with a homemade guillotine." Browsing the website more, you can find out that this website was ran by a 33-year-old man who went by Paul Morgan. He's asking for you to pay $20 so you can tune in to a live stream of him cutting off his feet. He intends to do this at some point in 2001, and he even assures the viewers that the filming crew and location have been secured, and he is currently building the guillotine, and he even shows off pictures of it. Now you might be wondering, what could Paul Morgan possibly be getting out of cutting his feet off? Is it really worth the profit? There is a little bit more to this website that makes it make sense. Reading further, the website explains that back in 1986, Paul Morgan was in an accident where he fell out of a boat trailer and then was ran over by it, and it forced him to spend 3 months in and out of the hospital. Initially, the accident did leave him paralyzed, although he did recover to the point where he could walk again with help from prosthetics. However, the prosthetics that he has right now are not very good, but to get newer ones, he basically needs to amputate his feet, and his insurance is refusing to pay for the amputation so he can get the better prosthetics. And so he's like, you know what, I'll just cut off my feet with a guillotine and then raise money to get new prosthetics. It looks like Paul was looking to raise around $100,000 with this idea, but unfortunately it doesn't look like he quite met the mark. The website does mention that he's had issues with lawyers trying to stop him or trying to tell the film crew that they'll get in trouble if they help him with this. I did find this news segment that Paul was featured in, and when you listen to him talk about it, it's kind of like, it's pretty crazy this is what healthcare has come to, but if this is what you really want to do, then sure.
People are like, you seem a little too excited about it. For me, it's going to be a celebration. This is a beginning of a whole new way of life for me.
But it seems like the website was just kind of abruptly abandoned with no sign off or official cancellations of the project or anything. Eventually though, and this is kind of a bad turn in the story, it feels like everything on YouTube's like this now, but I did see someone point out online that a man very closely resembling Paul Morgan's profile ended up being a sex offender in the area, and so it wouldn't be unreasonable to potentially speculate that these crimes might have played a role in him not continuing on with the website and ducking out of the public eye. I would not describe this as 100% confirmed, but it seems plausible. SeeMeRot.com. So if you try and visit this website nowadays, you'll just be met with this page timed out error. However, if you jump back in time with the Wayback Machine, you'll be met with this. And reading a little bit in, it says, latest news, new cam going into the ground in July 2004. Welcome to SeeMeRot.com. This site is dedicated to all who have gone before us. 2 months ago, we attached the world's first live coffin cams to the interior of our subject's casket. This was done after friends and family had seen the deceased for the last time. We then traveled over 2,000 miles with the casket in the family's chosen burial place, undisclosed to protect gravesite. Digging a little further, you can find that this supposed live stream is of a 41-year-old woman. And yeah, this website's like 100% fake. This supposed live stream right here is just like an image or GIF that changes every couple seconds. This website's pretty bizarre though, because it's always filled with a bunch of porn advertisements on it. Pretty interesting to think that the business model was to hook them with a coffin cam and then get their money with the live cams. Poorly planned comics. Webcomics have held a significant place on the internet for years now. There are plenty of very unique and interesting webcomics out there, but but in terms of weirdness, Poorly Planned Comics stands above the rest. Now, before we talk too much about Poorly Planned Comics, you need to understand the creator, Jack Masters. Jack Masters might be one of the most enigmatic figures on the internet that I've ever seen. We'll get to the super strange thing he's known for eventually, but first, you need a little bit of background. Unfortunately, some of Jack Masters' earliest online history seems to be partially lost to time, but thanks to the Wayback Machine and other archives, we can get a decent picture of who this guy was. Jack Masters participated in a number of different online communities, such as the ZZT community. ZZT is this old MS-DOS computer game where you can create these top-down adventure puzzle games and share them with other people. He created a lot of games using this tool, and many of them you can still play today. Most of his games were designed in a very cryptic way, where the player is given little to no explanation on what it is they need to do and how they're supposed to progress through the game, and so it's usually just kind of up to you to wander around and figure out things for yourself. All of his games were very puzzle or maze-like in nature. On top of creating these games, he also had a couple personal websites where he would post various other webcomics and write-ups about whatever seemed to be interesting him at the time. Many of his comics would take on a very surreal tone with bizarre imagery. Many of his creations would feature very poignant and thoughtful messages and ideas in them, making it clear that he was definitely a very talented artist when he put his mind to it. Finally, I should mention that Jack Masters was very involved with trying to solve the book Maze. Maze is this puzzle book released back in 1985, and the way this book works is each page in the book is a different room in a labyrinth, and it's up to you to solve these hidden puzzles in the rooms to navigate to the next room. And I should point out that the puzzles in this book are extremely convoluted and complex, and even till this day, it appears that some elements of this book remain unsolved. To give you an idea of how complex the puzzles are in this book, let me kind of walk you through how you're supposed to start solving these puzzles. All right, so looking at this page here, we can see we have a row of wood. It's a wood row. And then next to it, there's a sun. And so that kind of sounds like Woodrow Wilson. But then right here, you have an image of somebody shaking a spear. Well, that kind of makes you think of William Shakespeare. So this little image here in some way is representing Woodrow Wilson and William Shakespeare, who are both Wills. And knowing this is relevant to solving stuff in the puzzles later on, but this is as far as we're gonna go. I'm just trying to give you a taste of how insanely complex these puzzles are. Okay, now that you have some background on who Jack Masters was and the types of things he was interested in, it seems like all of these different interests ultimately culminated in him creating his most well-known work, Poorly Planned Comics. Now, at a first glance, this comic might seem just kind of unassuming. The comic starts off with this colorful cast of characters living in Poorly Planned Comics world, and they try and come up with other entertaining comics for the viewer. They get into various hijinks trying to create these comics, and the dialogue is honestly pretty funny, and the comic is full of these very candid and meta jokes. Like, the characters will stick their head outside of the panel of their comic to read a future upcoming panel, or sometimes the characters will complain about how the artist is getting lazy with the drawings, and they will constantly be breaking the fourth and fifth wall. However, as the comic progresses, the imagery gets way more bizarre, and the plot gets increasingly convoluted and cryptic. Basically, the characters begin simulating comics within their comic, and it's up to you as the reader to keep track of what timeline you are on. If that sounds confusing, that's because it really is. And things get extremely hard to keep track of eventually, to the point where when you start getting into some of the later issues of the comic, I don't think really anyone in the world understands what's going on at times. I don't even think the biggest Poorly Planned Comics fans really understand what's going on. In fact, at points the comic turns into more of a puzzle than a comic, really. And the puzzle is on the same level of complexity as the Maze book that I Jack mentioned earlier. Things are extremely cryptic and hard to follow. Now, the comic's descent into insanity comes to an end when on issue 285, the comic is kind of abruptly interrupted by this blue character here who says, "If you are reading this, I am dead. I've gone to the Madison Marriott West Hotel, taken the elevator to the 10th floor, and jumped off the balcony into the atrium. This comic is my last will and testament. I release all my intellectual property and all other data I have legal access and reproduction rights to into the public domain. P.S. If you want to know why I killed myself, the story is here. It's long though." Following this link, you will find this collection of emails that, when reading through them, will kind of provide you some insight into the life of Jack Masters. Now, I have read through this entire email exchange, and of course it is pretty dark, but it does reveal a lot about the headspace of Jack. First of all, Jack mentions that he has ADHD and schizophrenia, and mentions he's been using an increasingly high amount of Adderall and LSD. He also mentions that he seems to have developed a second personality that occupies his brain that he calls Susie, that he has sort of developed a companionship with, sort of like a tulpa or something, and Susie has been pushing him to do increasingly violent things. On Jack Master's YouTube channel, there's an archived live stream of him working on poorly planned comics while switching between talking as his normal self and talking as his alternate personality, Susie. Also, he's apparently on LSD.
You know, we never really solve what happens to these guys who get sent back to the beginning of time.
Well, we wrote strips that have them appearing in them, and then they get rescued by the magic school bus, basically. But we didn't end up putting them. They're not online currently because they're boring.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of Master and Reactor characters standing around talking. Yeah.
Like, he just goes back and forth. Throughout the document, he outlines other more specific reasons for why he intended to follow through with his plan. He mentions things like feeling like none of his friends care about him or care about the things he finds interesting, and finding no meaning on why he should move forward. Now, you might be wondering, did he actually do this? And yes, it appears so. There are news reports out there that line up with what the comic says. This happened over a decade ago now. Now, people online find a lot of interest in analyzing Jack Master's work and trying to find hidden meaning within the comics and trying to solve the puzzles within them. And if you get enjoyment out of that, I think that's totally fine. But I will also say, I think trying to solve the puzzles or find hidden meanings in this comic might be a little bit of a futile endeavor. It's probably impossible to really know what he meant by a lot of the things in this comic. There's also the fact that it looks like some of the comic was made while he was on acid. And also, I'm not totally sure, but I think some of the comic is missing too. And so it's honestly hard to say if there even is a central message to poorly planned comics at the end of the day, or if it was just more of kind of like a creative exercise for Jack Masters. Jack Masters was clearly a uniquely talented person with so much potential, but from the looks of it, it looks like he was kind of undermined by mental illness and a lack of good social connections. And I should point out, there is so much more material and sources I could dig through to learn more and more about Jack Masters, but I think this is kind of an appropriate place to stop for this video. And I'll save the 5-hour video analysis for another time. Exit Mundi. Exit Mundi is a very interesting website that can only be viewed through the Wayback Machine. What it is basically the creator just compiled a huge catalog of different possible end-of-the-world scenarios. Some of these end-of-the-world scenarios are pretty mainstream, run-of-the-mill things like a nuclear war, disease, climate change, asteroids smashing Earth. However, some of the more fringe scenarios that you don't hear about as often are pretty interesting. For example, what if the Y chromosome in men just continues to disappear? What if our planet gets smashed by a red dwarf star hurtling towards us? What if the universe stops expanding and just crunches in on us? The Big Crunch. A monetary terrorist attack that crashes all currency. Man, you don't really get fun websites like this anymore. It's kind of a lost art. Chris Benoit, Wikipedia editor. Now, this is a pretty mysterious situation involving the Chris Benoit Wikipedia Wikipedia page. But before I can explain it, you kind of need to know who Chris Benoit is. Chris Benoit was a very prevalent professional wrestler in the 2000s, and he competed in a lot of very high-profile wrestling leagues, including WWE. However, unfortunately, the thing he's probably most well remembered for at this point is in 2007, just a day before he was supposed to do another live show, Chris Benoit murdered his wife in their residence, and then murdered his 7-year-old son the next day before taking his own life. Of course, this was a pretty big shock to the pro wrestling world, and initially there was a lot of talk about these killings being fueled by some drug-induced episode. Now, we're not really here to talk about the murder itself, because something very bizarre would go on to happen on the Chris Benoit Wikipedia page. Of course, Chris Benoit being the very famous guy he was, he has a Wikipedia page, but somehow, before the public even knew about the murder, the Wikipedia page was edited to state that Chris Benoit would be missing an upcoming event due to the passing of his wife. Mind you, when this update was made to the Wikipedia page, the police didn't even know about the murder-suicide yet. It made it seem like this Wikipedia editor had some sort of inside information on the murder. And even stranger, many sources say that this edit on Wikipedia was made by someone who was using an IP address registered to Stamford, Connecticut, where WWE is based. Now, upon investigating the murder-suicide by Chris Benoit, the police found no evidence of any outside involvement. And nowadays, his actions are usually chalked up to him developing CTE from pro wrestling, and this brain disease ultimately pushed him to murder his wife and kids and then take his own life. But this still leaves us with the question, who was this editor on Wikipedia? And how did they know Chris's wife was going to die and he was going to miss an upcoming show? Well, the same IP address behind the edit, just days later, would post an apology on Wikipedia, basically saying that this was just some insanely lucky coincidental guess that he made based off of some speculation he saw on a pro wrestling forum. The police would go on to track down this guy, and it ended up being this just random 19-year-old college student in the area, and you can watch police interrogations of him.
The wrestler Benoit, there was like rumors going on because he missed the pay-per-view and his scheduled dates, which he never does. And I was reading the rumors and speculation online.
Where online?
On forums. I forgot the exact sites. I was just on Wikipedia and I just made the post. But a lot of people on Wikipedia make unsourced posts and stuff. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
So this was just I just assumed. I can't really explain why. It was just stupid.
I've watched these interrogations, and I'll be honest, at this point, I'm pretty sure this is a coincidence. It is honestly one of the craziest coincidences ever that someone would just kind of have a shot in the dark guess like that, but it probably is one. Listening to this kid talk, he really seems very out of his depth here, and he's very compliant with the police officer, and I don't know. When the police officer says that he's going to take his computer, he does get a little bit uneasy.
Where's this computer that you were using?
My laptop. Oh, it's at home.
It's at home. I'm going to ask for consent for it to search. All right? Okay.
But Occam's razor says he probably just has porn on it or something. I don't know. He's 19. They ultimately decided he was innocent and let him walk free. But till this day, you can see people in the comments of this video who still kind of find him suspicious. Fashion Avenue. Fashion Avenue is one of the first websites to really creep me out in a while. When you first visit the page, it's just this huge wall of text. And when you get to reading it, the website just is extremely strange. This website was apparently made by a woman who went by Carol, who was 21 years old when she made this website, and she's soon to be graduating college. And her whole thing is she really wants to be an amputee. Specifically, she wants both of her hands removed so they can be replaced with hooks. And on the website, she constantly repeats that she wants her hooks to be something called twin body powered prosthesis with their Dorrance 5X stainless stainless steel hooks. It honestly creeps me out a lot that she's constantly repeating that she wants this specific model of hooks on her hand. Twin body powered prosthesis with Dorrance 5X stainless steel hooks. She mentions that ever since she met an amputee as a kid, she's had this kind of like repressed desire to become an amputee with hooks, and recently she's kind of more thoroughly committed to wanting to actually live out this desire. She then goes on to mention that just a couple days before her upcoming graduation, she intends to purposely initiate some sort of quote-unquote accident that will cause her to lose both of her hands. And she's even been practicing with these hooks ahead of time so that she can be ready for when she no longer has hands and has hooks instead. Strangest of all, at the bottom of the website, there are some links titled "Showing off my DDE arm stumps without my prostheses," suggesting that she might have actually went through with this plan, but unfortunately these links are broken and you can't actually see any images, and so it's hard to say if she actually went through with it or not. Now, there's really a lot to unpack here. Some have speculated that this page might just be someone expressing their amputee fetish, which is possible, or perhaps this person might have something called body integrity identity disorder, which is a condition where sometimes people desire to remove limbs. And of course, there's also the possibility that this website might not be legit and it's more of a creepy creative writing exercise or something. Now, this rabbit hole runs pretty deep, but it seems like in the last couple of years, some people on Reddit have been able to track down this woman's Facebook account, and it appears that she does still in fact have both of her hands. I can't totally confirm that these people on Reddit managed to track down the right person, and of course, people on Reddit do just make stuff up sometimes, but I also haven't found any reason why what they're saying would be fake either. As to why she wrote all this stuff back in the day about wanting to cut off her hands is still unclear. I think most likely it was probably some sort of dark creative writing project, but it's also possible she might have had some sort of fetish, or she had a partner of hers kind of pushing her into this fetish, or maybe the writing actually came from her partner too. Raising a Psycho. So this is somebody's personal blog that has since been removed from Blogger's website, but you can only view it on the Wayback Machine now. This blog is written by a guy who, alongside his wife, adopted a child who they believe to be a psychopath. And by psychopath, he's not just like, oh, he's like a crazy kid. He's like a genuine, serious psychopath. Like, he uses psychological assessment tools to determine that his adopted child is a psychopath. The blog opens by stating, today is September 18th, 2000, the 5th anniversary of our Gotcha Day, and we will likely celebrate with a cake. Except for my wife and me, Gotcha Day isn't a celebration. It is another reminder of how our choice 5 years ago has devastated our family. The only hope it offers is knowing that we are 1 year closer to being able to kick him out of our house, 1 year closer to normalcy. The blog goes on to basically explain that him and his wife eventually decided that they wanted to raise a kid, but they didn't want to deal with a kid during its infancy phase. They wanted to skip it, and so they decided to opt for adoption instead. They ended up adopting a 6-year-old boy by the name of Lucas, and Lucas's background was pretty bad. They mentioned that Lucas's biological parents raised him in a really horrible environment involving a lot of guns and drugs and violence, and it ultimately led to them putting him up for adoption. After adopting Lucas, they pretty immediately realize that he has some pretty notable issues. The blog says that Lucas has pretty much no sense of right or wrong. He has no sense of time or size. He constantly pathologically lies. He has a grandiose sense of self-worth, and he does not respond to punishment whatsoever. They mention that they constantly try to punish him by forcing him to stay in his room or forcing him to just stand in a corner, sometimes for up to 4 hours, and it just never seems to have an effect on his behavior whatsoever. The dad basically goes on to bring up that in the field of psychology, there is something called a psychopathy checklist, which is basically this psychological evaluation checklist thing where if someone meets a certain amount of the points on the checklist, they could get the label of psychopathy. Basically, there's 40 possible points you can score on the checklist, and if you're above 30, you get the label of psychopathy. And the dad determines that his son earned a 38.5 5, squarely earning him a label of psychopathy. The dad admits that he has no background in psychology, but he just believes he's smart enough and understands Lucas enough to make this judgment. And by the way, I should point out that obviously I'm no expert in this field, but I think in a professional setting, the way professionals would go about actually determining what mental condition this kid has would probably be way different than how the dad is going about doing this. Now, to be clear, if what the blog is saying is true, Lucas does seem to be a pretty problematic kid. They do mention Lucas having quite a few problems with stealing, lying, having no remorse for others, having no sense of danger. They also mention more specific incidents, like apparently Lucas had an issue with groping a girl at school, and also at one point he broke into a neighbor's house, went through a girl's underwear drawer, and took pictures of himself naked on her digital camera, and this incident would actually get him in trouble with the law. He would be forced to wear an ankle monitor for it. They mentioned that to keep him contained, they have to have someone keeping an eye on him 24/7, and this has just been a really big challenge for their life. The blog continues to kind of update the readers on where they are in life and what antics Lucas is getting up into and how frustrated they are with trying to raise this very unruly kid. Now, judging based on the comments here, this blog was very controversial. The comments are filled with people giving their opinions on either how bad of parents they are and how they don't deserve to raise a foster kid, or alternatively, there's comments coming from other parents who have found the blog and really seem to empathize with the family because they too have a super problematic kid that they have no idea how to handle, and they kind of find comfort or solace in knowing other people have similar issues. Honestly, based on what the blog says, assuming the writer isn't completely just warping the truth, I don't really think any single person is really to blame for this whole situation. Like, on one hand, these people probably should have not adopted Lucas in the first place. They were like kind of from the get-go not in the right headspace to be adopting a kid. Like, this armchair psychoanalysis that he's doing of his kid just seems kind of wrong, and the fact that he's broadcasting it to the whole world makes it even worse. I should also mention, there's one point in the blog where the dad creates this hypothetical timeline of all the crimes he thinks Lucas is going to commit in the future, and he's basically saying that Lucas is in 6th grade now, but he expects him to somebody by 8th grade and obtain a gun at some point in 8th or 9th grade, and by 10th grade he'll be probably just completely out of their lives. But to be fair to Lucas, definitely seems like a really hard kid to raise. At an extremely young age, he's already like sexually assaulting people and getting in trouble with the law, and it would be incredibly frustrating as a parent to deal with something like that. And I'm not even really saying it's Lucas's fault for being the way he is. He had a terrible upbringing, but it would be challenging to handle nonetheless. Go give the website a read for yourself, and you can determine if Lucas is a psychopath or his parents are, or both. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It really helps me out. It helps the channel and helps me make videos more often. You can check out my second channel here. I'm going to be doing some cool stuff on there soon. Or you can check out the all new Pipe Instagram. We're having a lot of fun over there. And I'll see you guys next time.
All clear.